I don't even have my mic in position. I'm a terrible person. Alright, well, hello allesamen. Today we are going to be doing a much waited for video. We are going to be talking about Loki. Now, as most of you might know by now, I am a Loki apologist. I will make the apologies, and I won't stand for criticism. Now, I'm going to try to make my case in this video, and if you don't like it, then you don't like it. That's fine. That's cool. You can feel free to give this video a big old thumbs down. Starting with the beautiful notes that I have written, because I tried to make, I have 5 pages of notes on this. I tried to make notes so that I can stay on topic as much as I can, but knowing me, we're gonna go off on a tirade. So, starting off, Loki's father was known as Verbauti, which translates roughly to cruel striker. His mother was Laufey, sometimes also known as Nal, or Needle. His brothers were Helblindi and Byleister, and there is some debate over his exact bloodline, if his mother was in fact one of the Aesir, or if she was a giantess. We actually don't know much about his family. So when people say that, oh, Loki is not Aesir, well, he might actually be part Aesir because we don't know if his mother was or not. We just don't know. In fact, as you will see later in this video, there's actually a lot that we don't know about some specific things. Going back to his mother, it's worth noting that his surname is Laufeyarson, which is named after his mother as opposed to his father, which was the traditional way of doing things, of naming after the father. So that might be indicative to his mother having been more important than his father, or his mother being of higher ranking. We just don't know if there was ever a story as to why his last name was named after his mother as opposed to his father. We don't know. As for his own children, he is most famously known as the father of Hel, Jormungandr, and Fenrir, through the giantess Angrboda, who some also believe was Gullveig. She deserves her own video in her own right, because if I start talking about her now, we're going to go on for way too long. Anyway, Loki is also known as the Mother of Sleipnir, whom he birthed with Svadilfari during the whole building of the Wall of Asgard incident. Along with his children from Angrboda, he also has children with his wife Sigyn. Their 2 children are Nari and Narfi. Now, here's another part where it becomes confusing, because there are conflicting sources about these children. Snorri writes that then were taken Loki's sons Vali and Nari or Narfi. Snorri doesn't know. The Aesir changed Vali into the form of a wolf, and he tore asunder Narfi, his brother, and the Aesir took his entrails and bound Loki. However, in the colophon to the Lokasenna, which summarizes the same story, it's given different details. So here it states that Loki was bound with the guts of his son Nari, but his son Narfi was changed into a wolf. So there's a lot of different confusion because there's different manuscripts, there's different translations, and there was just a lot of details. So we just don't know exactly who was changed into a wolf, or if there was Nari and Narfi. I tend to believe that the names were Nari and Narfi, but then some people believe that they are just one singular person. Because Vali is also the name of a son of Odin, so I don't see that Loki having a son also named the same as a son of Odin. I feel like Loki wouldn't name his son the same things. But you are free to draw your own conclusion to that particular conundrum. Going back to some stories that Loki was involved in, we have a good amount of stories, a lot of them. There's a lot of stories, and I'm currently going through, I have 3 written down. I have the kidnapping of Idun, I have the making of Thor's hammer, and what other was the other one I wrote down? Oh, the building of the Wall of Asgard. I've written these 3 stories down, and I plan on reading them eventually, hopefully soon. And I don't know if you want, like, footnotes, if you want my particular interpretation after each one of these readings, or if you just want the stories as they are. Let me know down in the comments which you would like to see. Anyway, back on track. We're getting off track. We're gonna get back on the track. So, the story of the kidnapping of Idun, where during the travels of Loki and Odin, they are harassed by a Jotun, Thiazi, who is in the form of an eagle, and he prevents them from being able to cook their meat. And he makes a bargain with them and says, oh, I'll let this cook if you give me my share of it. So they agree. Thiazi decides to take all the best parts for himself, which pisses Odin and Loki off. Loki attacks him with a stick, and he gets swept up in the eagle's talons and is dangling for his life. So he ends up making a promise to Thiazi that he will deliver him the goddess Idun in exchange for being safely put back on the ground. Most people take this to believe that he's just throwing Idun to the wolves, like, oh, I'm just, endangering this person because I can. But the fact is, he was basically just keeping an oath. Thiazi told him, you will do this for me or I'm going to drop you, and I don't know if it would have killed Loki. I mean, we do know the gods can die, but I would imagine that being dropped from a great height wouldn't have been fun. And if you found yourself dangling from a great height by a giant mystical eagle, you might want to make a bargain too. So he ends up luring Idun out of Asgard, and she is swept away by Thiazi. The gods end up finding out once they start aging without her apples, and Loki is threatened into going to get her, which he does after borrowing Freya's falcon cloak. Thiazi is later killed after pursuing Loki back to Asgard, and then Skadi is inducted into the Aesir ranks after coming for retribution after her father is killed because Thiazi was her father. So the ending of this story, while some people think it is a negative story that shows that, you know, Loki is selfish or whatever, it actually has a good beneficial outcome, because had this not happened, Skadi would not have become one of the Aesir. So I see this as a positive outcome. Thiazi was killed. I mean, yeah, nothing really bad happened to Idun though. She was taken to Thiazi's hall, but she wasn't tortured. She was just taken there. In the story, it's never specified. It basically makes it seem like she's just kind of there. And then, obviously, Skadi is a powerful goddess in her own right, and I don't think anyone's going to be bad-mouthing her anytime soon. You probably don't want to do that. But yeah, there was a positive outcome that came out of that story. And in the story of the cutting of Sif's hair, some people take that to be a malicious act, but I mean... Come on, guys. But I really don't take that to be too much of a malicious act, especially considering the context in which it's coming in. Like, 1,000 years ago, hair could have been seen as a liability. Like, you got, you know, stuff they can get into it, hygiene's difficulty without running showers, and in battle somebody's gonna grab your hair. It's probably easier just to keep it cut off. And then what came out of it was a lot of the treasures that the Aesir are known for. For instance, you have Gungnir, which came out of it. That was Odin's spear. You have Gullinbursti and Skidbladnir, which is Freyr's ship and his boar. You have Draupnir, the ring that makes copies of itself every 9 nights. And then you have Mjolnir, of course. If Loki had never cut off Sif's hair, they probably would never have gotten Mjolnir. Which I think we could all agree was probably one of the best things to come out of it. Well, unless you're a giant, then it was probably the worst thing to come out of it. Those were all positive things that come out of the negative. Even the death of Balder could be seen as a good thing. For instance, his death was prophesied to need to happen. He had dreams, the Volva said that yes, he is going to die, and yet the gods still tried to kind of circumnavigate that and prevent his fate from happening. But as we know, the fate is something you can't really change. The gods are prophesied to die in Ragnarok. While they can try their best to avoid this, they know it's coming. It's going to happen despite their best efforts to try to stop it. So, in this instance, Loki isn't so much malicious as he is a catalyst for fate. This is what had to happen. Additionally, by this point, I feel that there had been a lot of animosity already brewing between Loki and the gods. For instance, you have his children being cast out for really nothing they have done. Particularly Hel. Hel doesn't really do anything malicious. And then in the cases of Jormungandr and Fenrir, yeah, they're prophesied to be killing Odin and Thor, but at the point when they're cast out, that's all they have to go off of. They didn't do anything themselves at this point except being born. The gods kind of just sealed their own fate by pissing them off. I mean, you would be fairly pissed off if you were thrown out of Asgard because you were prophesied to kill someone. Like, up until that point, I had no reason to kill you, but now you just, in Fenrir's case, you bound me and shoved a sword in my mouth. I mean, I'm not exactly gonna be that friendly after this. Up until this point, yeah, he'd been in Asgard and everyone was scared of him, but there's no stories of him doing anything to anybody. He was just there and people were scared of him. We're getting back on track. Okay, there's a lot that I need to talk about, and this is gonna be long, y'all. Ultimately, I don't think it comes down to, oh, Loki's done problematic things, and that's why the gods don't honor his accomplishments. Most of the gods have done problematic things. Odin! If you are looking for a god that hasn't done problematic things, I better not catch you working with Odin, because check out the story of Rind, or Rinda, the mother of Vali, because, yeah, that story is, Odin? That's the T. That's also my dog. Anyway, barring the Loki Center, almost all the stories that he's involved in have a positive outcome at the end. In the case of Balder, yes, he is killed, but he also is reborn after Ragnarok, and while he is in Hell, I mean, he's not suffering. Like, when Odin goes to Hell to learn more about Balder's dreams, he sees that Hel has made the hall comfortable and it's all done up. She basically rolls out the red carpet for Balder, so it's not like he's like suffering in a cell somewhere. He's got it pretty good, to be honest. So it's not a bad ending to that story. Yes, he did die, but to be honest, the Aesir were hurling weapons at him. I mean, so going on to the Lokasenna, which is one story which I have a lot to say about. My interpretation of the story is that Loki is done playing nice with the Aesir. Perhaps he's tired of being their scapegoat, especially in the case of the building of the Wall of Asgard. All he did in that story was suggest that they give the builder an impossible task. None of the other gods were coming up with ideas, so all he suggested was that yes, we keep the terms, but we also shorten the time frame. And everybody agreed that there's no frickin' way he should be able to do it in that time. Everybody agreed, but because it was Loki's idea, he was threatened with death and dismemberment unless he rectified the situation. But literally nobody else came up with another option. Nobody went against it, nobody questioned it, nobody tried to say, oh hey, maybe he will be able to do this. But anyway, at that point, I mean, especially in that story, really Loki didn't do anything wrong aside from try to figure out a situation which nobody else was figuring out, and then he was solely blamed for it. So anyway, so maybe he was tired of being a scapegoat for that, maybe he was tired of being remembered for his bad deeds, whereas the other gods who have flaws, but nobody talks about those. They always talk about the positive stories. But when Loki is talked about, the only thing most people talk about is how terrible he is, and oh, he did this, and all his trickery and lies. Odin! So in the Lokasenna, Loki's basically like, no, I'm done being talked about like this, when everybody forgets what you've done, but brings up what I do all the time, and they tend to forget the good things I've done, so I'm going to call out every one of you who decides to talk ill against me. It's basically a fuck around and find out kind of moment. But it's also kind of a what's that phrase? Let the one without sin cast the first stone, because it's like, none of you are above blame for doing questionable things. So for instance, in the beginning of the story, when he goes into the hall, Bragi tells him that the gods will never give him a seat in this hall, and then Loki responds by saying that, oh, you remember Odin when we mixed our blood, and you swore that you would never take a drink unless one was also offered to me. And then he is given Vali's seat. Not Vali, Vidar's seat. It was Vidar. So once he's seated, Loki then proceeds to call out Bragi, who was the one who said that he shouldn't get a seat to begin with. Loki calls him a coward, basically that he can talk a big game, but he can't walk a big game. So then Idun speaks up in defense of him, and Loki proceeds to call her out. So it's basically going back and forth. It's kind of almost like fighting in a way. And here's where some people get conflicted. Because Loki goes around pointing out the goddesses, in particular their sexual exploits, which some people take to be misogynistic. I don't see it as misogynistic, especially if you consider that perhaps, I don't know the marriage arrangements of these goddesses, but for instance, Idun is married to Bragi, but Loki calls her out for sleeping with other people. But if they're supposed to be in a monogamous relationship, and one party sleeps with somebody else without the consent of the other partner, then that's technically cheating on somebody, and if you're trying to keep that hidden, then that's not exactly honorable. I mean, maybe they had an open relationship, I don't know. But it's not just calling out people's promiscuity, it's calling out specific sexual acts that they did that they don't want brought to light. Loki's kind of like, own up to your shit. I think nobody's going to argue that if you're sleeping with somebody and you're kind of hiding it from your partner, that's not a good thing. So I take it to mean that. It's not like, oh, women shouldn't sleep around. It's that if you're going to sleep around with someone, don't try to hide it. Like, it's some big secret, especially if you already have a partner that you're not telling it. So I think what this is emphasizing is that none of the Aesir are above reproach. The lesson of Loki is really taking those negative aspects that you might not be proud of and facing them and being able to say that, yes, I did these things. I'm not going to hide them. I'm going to learn from them. I'm not going to try to bury them so that I can't learn a lesson from them. I'm going to actually face them and be like, yes, I fucked up. But here's what I can do in the future to stop myself from entering into this circle of constant fucking up. So yes, basically at this point Loki's like, you want to lambast me, you want to cast out my children, you want to threaten me, even though my tricks have given you gifts in the past, like such as Mjolnir, you're welcome, Thor, and Gungnir, Odin. And it's like, at this point, you're gonna get as good as you give. you want to focus on my negatives, I'm going to focus on your negatives, because that's all that we're giving each other in this relationship. So, can Loki bring mischief into your life? Yes. Hell yes, he can. And I heard somebody say once that Loki is a shameful opportunist, if you will. If the only opening you give him is a malicious one, then he's going to play that part with all the bells and whistles attached. However, if you approach him with an open mind and acknowledge that there is no black and white when it comes to dealing with him, then he can be a great deity to work with. There's another thing I wanted to talk about, and that was Loki and Gender. And the concept of gender in the way he is presented. In the Loki-Senna, Odin tells Loki, he doesn't really tell him, he says that Loki has spent time on Midgard and he has birthed children in this time. And it's also known that he is the Mother of Sleipnir. So this shifting between sexes has led many to associating Loki with LGBT matters. And I, for one, support this correlation. Not just because of the shape-shifting, but also because of his kind of status as an outsider deity. So Loki is by and large an outsider in the Pantheon, and that's how many in the LGBT community feel themselves to be in today's society. I personally believe that this can extend to people who are struggling with mental health issues, and as somebody who is autistic, anxious, and non-binary, I can very much attest to this feeling. So I definitely think that Loki speaks to a lot of people who don't fit into the traditional norm, and I think that while he does have some negative connotations, so does Odin, so does Thor, so does Skavi, so does Freya. The whole majority of gods and goddesses, mostly all of them, have some kind of negative connotations if you look deep enough. And I think that's one of the major lessons that Loki can teach. He doesn't want us to bury those things that we are not proud of. Instead, he wants us to acknowledge the secrets and bring them to light so that we can face them. And while sometimes this can be a harsh lesson to learn, it is ultimately one of the best things you can do for yourself. I think that's one reason why a lot of people call him World Breaker, because he can quite literally dredge up the darkest parts of your life, throw them in your face, and say, you need to deal with this. Because keeping something inside and having it fester for long enough is only going to build up negativity. That's my interpretation of Loki at a very base level. So, yes, Loki is somebody that you shouldn't fear. He's not a negative anything. He's not negative. If you want him to be negative, and that's the only thing that you're going to let him be, then yeah, he's gonna be negative. But the main point of all of this is that in the stories, yes, he does negative things, but I think that helps emphasize that even out of negativity can come positive outcomes. You have to think long term. You have to think, is binding this wolf going to bring on Ragnarok? Maybe I shouldn't piss off the wolf prophesies to kill me. There's a lot of things to talk about, and there's a lot of interpretations of Loki, and this could be a goddamn thesis that goes on for hours. But anyway, I hope that this has been cognizant. I don't know if it has been. Now, I have a lot to say on this matter, and I will, constantly be defending him. So yes, I hope that this video has been a little bit informational, and I hope that maybe you have a different view on Loki now if you came into this going, I hate him. I hope you're a little bit more open-minded, and if you just wanted more information on Loki, I hope that it has been informative to you, and maybe you want to go learn more about him on your own. But yes, so thank you all so much for watching this video, and if you have any other questions, or if you have any comments, if you want to go tell me that this video sucks, leave that big thumbs down. And yeah, so I will see you all in the next episode, and until then, bye. His surname is, matronymic? I can't pronounce this. Matronymic. His surname is based off of her instead of being, what am I talking about? What? Go back.